Sell your business and get the hell out of it. You can't be trusted with a customer service business if you are not willing to go through door number 2. And that's fine as long as you're willing to grow. But if you're not willing to grow and you're not good enough, you should fire yourself. If nobody's buying what you're selling, sell something better. The end. The definition of what managed services is fluid. Because some people, one F you never call me again is all it takes, and they can't make another call. They're fully depressed. You can change your relationship with the pain and realize you can disempower it.
Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of MSP Insider, where I have the pleasure of interviewing Brian Gillette, who is the founder of Feel Good MSP and the host of the MSP Sales Podcast. Thanks for being on, Brian.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, you know, it's not very often, and you probably feel this way too, where you truly get to sit and geek out with a sales-focused MSP expert. You know, coming from that myself, it's really refreshing, especially when we can bring even more refreshing approaches to the conversation. So really looking forward to this one. Before we dive in, though, the way that we structure the show is actually by having the prior guest leave behind a question for the next one. So it's a little bit of a double blind date.
Okay.
And so the question that is left behind for you was actually from Kevin Clune with MSP Growth Hacks. And the question that he had is, if we look at the evolution of the industry from break fix to T&M to fixed fee agreements to now kind of the roll-ups and aggregation of the industry, where do you feel the industry is going next?
Where do I feel it's going, or where do I feel it should go? Because I think those are two different answers.
Yeah, I think it's valid to give both, honestly.
Okay.
Let's start with his direct answer, and then we can challenge it.
Well, where it's going is pure VARification, because private equity is coming in droves, as we all see, and in zoons, these dollars are coming in to finally consolidate this industry. And I'm not the most qualified to talk about why M&A has taken so long, but we all have our there's conjecture, right? But essentially, like, the average operational maturity and sales maturity was just too low to acquire almost every MSP. And now they're finally growing up big enough where the big boys can aggregate them. That's kind of what we're seeing, right? But with acquisition platforms and standardization and integration of your $1 million gross to your $1 million EBITDA MSPs, is we're seeing an increase of the standardization of the stack, increase of the standardization of the product models, the good, better, best-ification of what we do. And so I actually think that the customer service impact of the MSP industry is devolving as we all become less focused on the best possible product and more focused on the most sellable product from an M&A standpoint, rather than what is the best thing I can offer to this 25-user accounting firm. That's what I think is happening. And I think there's going to be I think there's going to be a mass exodus from the under-managed roll-up platforms. There's going to be a lot of clawbacks from guys who thought they were going to get a $7 million exit. Turns out they got a $4.5 million exit because all their customers jumped ship because their new MSP sucks. Because it used to be great and now it isn't great. Like, that's a tale as old as time. So then what we're going to start seeing is more of the like electric AI or whatever that, the one I'm talking about. AI powered, super duper cheap, customer service stuff that's synthesizing help desk is going to steal more and more market share. Or I'll say that the market share will correct for all of the customer service quality impact of the aggregation. So I think that managed services is going to have some lean years. Not the industry is going to keep going up in dollar amount. They're going to keep saying that the industry is growing because it is. But I think that the average small business average MSP is going to see an impact in their ability to retain customers if they keep going the direction that we're going. uh, here's what I think should happen.
Perfect.
And I was, I was literally just thinking about this today. Do you ever talk to yourself out loud? Like, do you ever think
Yeah,
out loud or no?
I do. Yep.
So I do this all the time. I think out loud while
Mm-hmm.
I'm driving. It's like I'm giving a speech to my windshield. I do this all the time. I practice
Mm-hmm.
selling. I practice hypothetical sales situations. How would I dig myself out of this insane situation in conversationally? And like, I just like practicing. But I also like
Yeah.
thinking out loud as if I'm talking on a podcast, but I'm talking to myself. I have my
Yeah.
own podcast in my mind. And I was just talking about this today that like I'm so sick of MSP owners whining, just in general, about just whining, the amount of whining that's in our industry
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
But the big areas are like, well, I can't keep anybody. Nobody will pay for my whatever. My customers won't. I offered them, it's only $7 a seat to add endpoint hardening, and they said no. How come? I'm such a victim. But MSPs come to me and they're like, you don't understand. It's not like it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. There's so many people selling what I sell now. It's so competitive and everybody's cheap. If nobody's buying what you're selling, sell something better.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
end. Sell
Right.
something better. Like the definition of what managed services is fluid. As the premise of this question, managed services did not exist 25 years ago, and in 10 years, as we know it, it will be completely gone. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
100% gone. You will never need a human to reset your firewall in 10 years, unless you're an enterprise business. This is my little opinion. Look at, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So my
Yeah.
point
So
is, go ahead.
I was going to say, what I want to do is dig in kind of to the story beneath the story there that exists.
Mm-hmm.
There's a handful of things there, all of which are worth spending almost all of the time on. One
Right.
is really that victim mindset, right? Which I believe is partially the byproduct of the way that this industry has evolved, even for the last, to your point, 25 years, where you have technicians and tacticians that created a company because they didn't want to work for someone else in most cases. And then they were good enough with people that they turned around one day and had a handful of employees and a handful more customers. And at some point, the company sort of found its peak, mostly because there wasn't a sales and marketing focus first, right? And then second part was really that like victimhood to an extent,
Mm-hmm.
where it's really just like a skill set deficit, right? I mean, I know I didn't come out of the womb as a born salesperson. I spent the first 11 years in MSP as on the technical side of the house before I got humbled really, really quickly on the sales side of the house, and then realized that this is a skill set that I need to flex and build and grow. And I believe that you had a somewhat similar story. And so what I want to do is really, one, put the elephant in the room on the table of like this victimhood mindset of I tried it once, it didn't work, or even worse yet, I did what you told me to do, and this is what happened. I'll never trust you or try it again.
Yeah.
Those are really two common things, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then, but at the same time, there's a couple of examples sitting in this conversation together where we experienced that same headwind, but we found a way through. So what would you say to that MSP owner that's sitting there listening now? And if you had to give them, I don't know if it's one or if it's three, if it's a framework, if it's just one tip, trick, hack, cut, like to get off the X and understand it's okay to suck at this, but it doesn't mean I can't try or I can't get better or I can't innovate. Like what's the first step they can use or do?
Right. So in there's this great phrase. I'll say it this way. You need to differentiate between your explanation and your excuse. So you have an explanation as to why you can't sell, but it's not an excuse for never getting good at it. Okay, I can't sell because I'm technical. I don't like people. I'm very, very introverted. I have no social skills. My mom always protected me from the other kids, so I never really got to play. In fact, I was bullied a lot. and I have all these weird, I don't really think highly of myself. I've got body image issues. I've got self-confidence issues. This fantastic information. And actually, if you can say everything I just said, you're already in the 75th percentile of the most healed and evolved MSP owners, because most of them haven't even yet admitted or learned those that they have all those limitations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're still unintegrated as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So they just go, well, I'm smart and I'm not going to pay for that. And they make this excuse, and then they put machismo, or they put ego, or they put all of these things are just shame flexing its muscles. So you're ashamed of yourself, you're ashamed of your product, you're ashamed of your dreams, you're ashamed of your failures, whatever it is. And you don't yet have the bravery to go and face those inner traumas. And so you're stuck as a human being. You're not growing in those areas. So those are really valid. And I know my tone right now doesn't sound particularly paternal or even empathetic. And I understand that. But because, like, if I'm having a face-to-face conversation with somebody about this, obviously I'm not going to be saying it the way I am right now. Like, I'm not a jerk, but I am, frankly, I'm in an interesting seat because I have this conversation over and over again, and it's always the same conversation. And it turns to like, well, what do you think your role in this has always been? And then they lash out, they get defensive, and they go, no, it's just Phoenix. You don't get it. Phoenix is just like this. You just don't get it. LA's not like this. No, your city is not special, and the world is not out to get you. You just suck at this. But as I've said all the time, the good news is that it's your fault, because that's the only thing you have any control over.
Right.
Is your own personal, is what you can, is you, you know? So my advice would be, stop letting your explanations be excuses and start getting a little bit better. You know, like it requires, what is the saying? That, well, you know, Nelson Mandela, fear is not the absence, or courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. If there wasn't any fear, it wouldn't require courage. But you do have fear, which is why it requires courage to do it. So courage and grit are the two things that an entrepreneur maketh. The thing is, you've got grit in your strengths. You've got technical grit. You thought it was going to be this. You're 5 hours into trying to troubleshoot, find this bug. You still haven't figured it out. You're exhausting every single option. Then you start going to the unusual or irrational options. You start triple checking everything. That's just your job. And you go, man, I love this job. This is crazy. Let me pop another Red Bull. Because that's the thing, that's a skill that you're affluent with. So it's easier to develop grit in your strengths. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. And I think it's self-evident. I'm curious if you experience this too in the MSPs that you coach, is that one of the first places I go to find the truth when I'm in those conversations with the MSPs is like, show me your to-do list. Like, let me see all the sticky notes. Let me see your Notion tab, wherever you're keeping it, just show me the to-do list. And generally I'm engaged because they want to grow and want to sell too, right? But like the sales level activities, if they're on the list at all, are the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4, like however long the list is, it's at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And that's a natural representation, I think, of what you're describing, where we play to what fulfills us. We play to what we prefer. We play to what we feel we're amazing at, which in most cases is the tech stuff. And so when I found any sales related thing, like, oh, I need to follow up on that quote, or I still need to build the quote I said I was going to deliver 3 weeks ago as problem number, or to do number 23 on that list, it's like, look no further. I understand what the issue is, right? So now we have a more objective problem to solve. Either it's fear of failure preventing you from taking that step to feel vulnerable and present the quote, or it's, you know, abdication of ownership altogether over the task that needs to happen.
Which is the same. It's fear. It's just manifesting differently.
Right.
You're still afraid to do it. One way is you're afraid to try. Another one is you're afraid to fail. You know, whatever.
One of the other ways I saw that happening, it's like, to your point, it's the same parallel. On the tech side of the house, I used to see this all the time with technicians that would, they'd hold on to the ticket for way too long, right? They've exhausted their capacity. They've reached out for some help. They're now in the category of pissing off the customer. You just don't know about it yet because the phone hasn't rang back. But the reason they held on to it wasn't because they didn't necessarily want to get the help or want to learn how to do it, but it was the act of asking for help was like this fear of failure or the
Right.
perceived fear of failure.
Right.
And so now if you juxtapose that back to the sales side of the house, where you don't have 20 years of experience and you aren't seen as the best in the room at the thing, like the fear monster is that much greater, right?
Yeah.
On that side of the house. Accepting that as truth, we got it on the table and it's there. So accepting that as truth, have you come up with any, whether it's a mnemonic device or a pair of socks or a certain shirt or like some other mental model that you've been able to begin to crack the code for the MSPs that you coach on? This is step number 1 to embrace the suck and get better at the same time.
The short answer is yes, I have many models for this. I don't have like a catch-all mantra, because it really, what we do, like my job is to interpersonally work with somebody on their limitations and get to how their limitations are manifesting and what they're rooted in. And then we have to make a brick by brick, step by step path out of it. And I like to make those. There's some things that we do to gamify the process. Like, I remember I was coaching a guy who he came to me and he was cold calling. He's like, Brian, I'm going to be honest. Like, it took him like every ounce of courage he had to say this, because the CEO was also, his boss was on the call, and he was like, I'm starting to get really discouraged. I'm like, okay, tell me more. And he's making $80 a day, I think $100 a day.
Sure.
But his numbers per day were going down because his conversations weren't high, and he was just like, I'm running out of steam. Because like he's getting rejection fatigue. Yeah. So that's what it is rejection fatigue. So I said, great. What we're going to do is you're going to get a clipboard. I want you to print out like a piece of paper make this checklist that says your rejection quota. You now have a quota of how many times you're rejected. And you can't stop working today until you're rejected 80 times.
Yeah.
And we just pivoted the perspective. Now, is that a long-term solution? No, because he's not now listening for rejection. But the point is to de-escalate his emotional response to the rejection itself by putting it back into context and realizing this is actually nothing. Someone saying no to you, you get to determine how big of an impact that has on you. Right now, when you feel out of control, when you're out of your resiliency zone, you don't have any tools or perspective, then rejection happens to you, and then your emotional response happens to you. Because some people, one F you, never call me again is all it takes, and they can't make another call. They're fully depressed.
Yeah.
And I'm not discounting the reality of that pain that they're feeling. But it is, another way of saying this is like you can change your relationship with the pain mentally, and realize that you can disempower it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
So
absolutely,
there's a lot of identity work, like honestly, that has to be done for that, because you have to start realizing I'm worth it, whether people know that or not.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what we're trying to get people to do.
Right.
And then they can go, oh, that poor honey, they were not on the same wavelength as me. Next person.
Yeah.
And you just know how to, because that's not, you can't white knuckle, how do I say this? You don't want to be resistant to rejection. You want to be resilient to rejection. The difference between resistance and resilience is this. Resistance is your ability to hold your shape when faced with opposition, right? So concrete has a very, very high compression strength, very low tensile strength. Metal has a very high tensile strength, which is why they put rebar instead of concrete. Now you can compress the hell out of it, and you can't bend it because you can't bend metal. But you could bend rock much easier, and that's why it crumbles. So rock is very resistant, it's not very resilient, right? Then look at like a reed or a tree. Resilience is your ability to come back into shape when you've been bent out of shape. That's what resilience is. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So feel the feeling, be disappointed, but then come back quickly. That's the role of a true entrepreneur. But a lot of times people, they feel like it would be more masculine, more appealing, and maybe more emotionally safe to never be bent out of shape. And then so they try to embrace this resilience perspective. And what happens is you get desensitized and you become less considerate, less empathetic, and you stop listening because you're on self-defense mode, and you call and you go, and if you hang up on me, well, oh yeah, well, fuck you too, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what they do. Sorry, I don't know if I can, I don't know where this is.
Yeah, you can. There's
Okay.
no rules.
Anyway, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like this?
It absolutely makes sense. I'm so glad you went that route again. And I didn't know what to expect because we didn't prime for this, but so rarely have I experienced somebody who can distill the truth behind the salesman, saleswoman, the salesperson.
Yeah.
Like sales to me, doing that for 8 years was, I guess technically still, but 8 years of that taught me, it was like 8 years of the absolute best self-discovery, self-awareness, self-development, and like autonomous, independent opportunity I've had in my life at this point. You know, only topped by being a co-founder, because it's all of those things plus a bunch more.
Right.
But rarely do I see many of the sales leaders, gurus, best practices, thought leadership, any of that crap, talk truly about mindset. But beneath mindset, like we just cut several layers deeper to resilience as an example. And I don't want people to tune out because now we're starting to talk about feelings or any of those things. Like this is where you've got to lean in and understand, first of all, like take a deep breath and be glad because it's not your fault. Right.
Yeah.
First and foremost, it's not your fault. It's how we sort of all are somewhat wired to begin with. The human experience is sort of defaulted that way. And to your earlier point, because it is true, we get to do something about it. Should we choose to, we at least have the choice to do something about it. And that was something that I really preferred. I came to respect the malleability of a successful salesperson.
Yeah.
And not even that, but the root elements of what success required. In my brand new reps who'd never sold anything, were from outside the industry, like honestly some of the best ones to have because there's less head trash to get rid of, was empowering them with the ingredients to ultimately go through that same journey, and beyond. So I wish I had a great question out of that. I just wanted to try to capture a bit of the essence of what we sort of have a mutual understanding about, but it's only because we've lived it and breathed it and become it.
And if I can, let me put a capstone on this though, that especially to your point that like, it's very tempting to tune out when you come onto a call like this as an MSP owner and you're like, oh good, they're going to tell me how to sell. We start talking about your feelings and you go, nah, I wanted to learn how to sell. Yeah. I need you to hear me say this. If having the right list of activities was all it took, you would be successful. You've read enough books. Yeah. You've come to enough webinars. Information gap is not your problem. The problem is, we call it in Feel Good MSP, we call it the invisible wall. Because there's a pile of stuff that you should do, that you're conscious of. Mm-hmm. But you're not doing it. I should do that. I should do this. I should do this. And there's reasons why it gets de-escalated on your priority list. It gets shunted. It gets whatever. Mm-hmm. So there's this wall between you and what you're supposed to be doing. So what people come to me for is more supposed to be's. What am I supposed to do? And I go, you don't understand. All I'm going to do is throw them on the mountain of other shit you're not doing that you're supposed to be doing. You should ask your wife how her day was, but you're not doing that either. You know what I mean? And I could tell you again, but in reality, then you start nagging. Mm-hmm. And then I just become one more person who's nagging you. That's just, and then I'm going to your emotional relationship with my voice and my being capital W, I'll call it our voice, is the amalgamized voice of thought leaders who you aspire to emulate or whatever, right?
Yeah.
People just, but a lot of, so that's what happens. And then it just becomes more stuff you ought to do, but you're never going to do it until you tear down the invisible wall, which is a brick by brick personal discovery process. So that's really the first phase, is like, how bad do you want sales? How bad do you want to succeed? And I mean this. What will you really do? Are you willing to look inward and do some work? Are you willing to like journal? Are you willing to meditate? Are you willing to apologize to people who you've wronged? Because that's what's between you and success. You know what I mean? Like, everything you want in life is on the other side of what you're afraid of. And that's a perpetually true statement, because if you weren't afraid of it, you would already have it, because you would have already conquered it. Like, that's what you are. You're a conqueror. But there's this moat of fear around you, and everything you want's out there. And until you're willing to face the fear, you'll never get the thing you want.
Yeah.
And the thing that people come to me for, it's always the same, dude. Well, we just need more leads. That is not fucking true.
Right.
You don't have leads because you haven't been willing to do the hard work of clarifying to your TAM, your total addressable market, why it even matters that you exist.
Yeah.
They have no clue. So nobody cares about you. And so then you want to keep outsourcing the work. It's like, this is my last analogy, and I'll get off my bandstand. I'll get off my soapbox on this, but like, sales is the heart of your business, right? There is no amount of money I could pay a trainer for them to do cardio for me. Right?
Right.
There's no amount of money you can throw. You could throw n times infinity, n to the power of infinity dollars at a personal trainer. And all the personal trainer can do is come, slap you awake, drag you, drive you to the gym, pump you full of supplements and food, and the right food, and then say, sit on this bike, stand on this treadmill. But if you don't walk on the treadmill, your cardiovascular health will not improve. I am a sales coach. I help you increase your cardiovascular health, of your business, because your sales is your heart. You can't throw money at me and get a healthier heart. All I can do is everything else. And that's all critical. If you don't know how to self-motivate, or you don't have you don't know how to get in shape or whatever, what foods to eat, or maybe you've got pre-existing injuries, and so exercise is more complicated for you, to stretch the metaphor, if I may. But that's what I'm getting at here, is like, guys, it's actually very simple. You just have to do the thing you're afraid of doing. Yeah. And if you can do that, you will get results.
Yeah, there's no reason for me to emphasize the pieces of what you just said, outside of to offer this one hack that I had for myself to do just that, right? Because again, my self-awareness had to rise to the level where I could be aware of the emotion I was having that was building, that was putting the distance between the thing I knew I needed to do and my fear of, or lack of desire of doing, was as simple as 3, 2, 1, do it, right? Like, if I felt that in my chest, that was my physiological trigger to count down 3, 2, 1, and I did it. I wasn't allowed to get to 0. I wasn't allowed to go negative. I wasn't allowed to start at 10. It was just 3, 2, 1 action, because execution cured everything else. Yeah. Like, anxiety doesn't exist in action. Fear didn't exist in action. The what ifs did not exist in action. It only existed in the idle state before or after. And something that I learned about myself and my peers in the MSP space along that way was, on the tech side of the house, the predominant personality tended to look at the world through a lens of, here are the 100 reasons why this won't work. Whereas I began to experience and understand on the sales side of the house, most of those people looked at the world through the lens of, how can I make this work? And one wasn't any better than the other. They were codependent and necessary. The best combination was actually when how can I make this work? How can we make this work? Was actually the question asked to the here's the 100 reasons why mind. Because they always came out with like the best freaking answer right here, right now. Like it is just there. Like, oh shit, I never would have thought about that on my own, right? And then you could take it and then what? 3, 2, 1, go, and you execute. Whether that's sending the email you should have sent last week, but now you have to think you need to apologize because you feel shame, to your point earlier, or insert any situation. It's like just get into the motion of doing it. Like if you're gonna suffer, mine was a survival mechanism. I didn't want to do it any more or less before or after I did the thing, but I just chose consciously, I'm only going to allow myself to suffer for 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And then it's done.
But allowing yourself to feel it is a very important part of staying. Right. I used the word integrated earlier, like staying integrated as a person, connected to yourself.
Yeah.
Is a really important, it's a critical part of self-awareness. It's a critical part of empathy. And I think it's a much more resilient, evolutionarily profound way of managing motivation. Yeah. Because shame is also a very powerful motivator. Very, very powerful short-term motivator. But mostly what shame does is it sutures you, it stitches you to the ground. Like what shame will ultimately do is paralyze you. You know what I mean? So mostly what it motivates you to do is what to avoid. It doesn't really help you motivate you to drive towards action the way that true inspiration can, which can only really come when you're an integrated human being.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. Something I want to connect the dots on that you had mentioned earlier, and I didn't dig in, and I should have at that time, but it's great now. Because we've talked a lot about people and humanity and existence and integration. And when you talked about the industry earlier and the direction it is going compared to where it ought to go, there was an element there where you mentioned the user experience, like in the service experience, right? The hospitality experience. I want to go back to that and unpack that a bit. Let's define what you mean by in a world where we move back towards that. What are some of the characteristics that you see come alive in the MSP again?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I bet you have a lot of these thoughts too, because you sold managed services and now you sell into managed services. I mean, in short, the premise is that like the probably the last and most difficult skill for AI to replace is humanity. Like pardon the sort of reductive nature of that sentence. Like care. Like robots can't care. They're incapable of caring. Humans can care. That's the difference. So I understand that we want to go AI to increase our efficiency, but actually what you don't want to do is chase a model that's driving a wedge between you and your customers. Because the managed services, an MSP is not a technology business. They're a customer service business.
Yeah. Rewind. Say it again. Listen again. It's so true.
A managed service business is not a technology business. You're a customer service business. That's what you sell. And you're supporting end users. You're supporting executives. You're supporting IT executives. Maybe in 3 different ways. Maybe you're co-managed versus staff aug versus full all-you-can-eat, whatever. Doesn't matter. There's somebody that you're helping. If you're a cloud service provider, you're still a customer service business. You're just supporting you're supporting 1 or 2 people inside of a larger org, usually, right? Your job is to take care of your customers. That's your only job. And oftentimes MSPs will think that because they're so good at managing the technology that equates to customer service. That's not true. Case in point, there's MSPs who have no clue what they're doing who are stealing your customers. And you have the best stack and you're the smartest person. Good for you. Nobody cares. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you don't like them and they don't like talking to you, they're going to leave you. So this is not as simple as just be nice, but that would get you 60% of the way there. Get rid of your IVR, first of all. Or if you have an IVR, don't make it a robot voice. Dude, all robots can sound indistinguishable from humans now. There's no excuse for you to have a thank you for calling services. That's it's
press
literally
1 for sales, not 1 for service, right? Like the priority of what you're placing in the order at which your customer's calling can tell you a lot about what your intentions or where your priorities are.
Oh yeah. It's inexcusable. That's just inexcusable. Fix that. Fix that right now.
Yeah. Right.
Your wait times should be 30 seconds maximum from a customer, right? Maximum. There's no excuse for you to take longer than 30 seconds to answer your customer's phone. Period. If they submit a ticket, there is zero excuse for you to not call them. Don't email them, call them, then email them.
Right.
Easy.
Yeah.
Hey man, got your ticket. Listen, I'm right in the middle of a big project. I just want to make sure this isn't absolutely critical to do right now. How am I feeling? Did I read that right, or do I need to read the ticket again? Okay, it's got to be done before lunch. Listen, in that case, I'm going to pass you over to Carlos because I'm right in the middle of a project and I feel like I don't want to half-ass this for you. I'm going to pass you over to Carlos. So sorry I couldn't help you, but hey, best of luck and Happy New Year.
Yeah.
That's what you should be doing. That's your job.
Every time. Every single time.
That's what you sell. That's why you're 200 a seat, because you do that. And anyway, so I know I sort of rabbit trailed slightly from your question, but well, no, not really. That's your job.
That is the job. And what I heard you say, just for clarity, for anyone who's trying to read between those lines, this proved true for the entire 18 years that I sat in every seat that I sat in at MSPs. Everything, absolutely everything, came down to 2 things. It's really one. It was either expectations or communication. Everything. And if it was an expectations problem, it was actually a communication problem. Thus, everything boiled down to communication.
Yeah.
So if you really unpack the example you just gave, like it could literally be a script that someone could train off of. If they go back and listen to it, it was all about communication and expectations. Hi, Brian, I see that you have a ticket here. My understanding is this, is that. Do we have an understanding here? Yes, great. Timeline. You need it done before lunch? Great. I'm going to move you to Carlos. Carlos will take care of it so that I can keep doing the thing I was doing.
Yeah.
All we did was communicate and set expectations or manage them and reset them. And the very first thing that often went out the window, I hate absolutes, so it can't be always, but it was often. It was more times than not. Whenever I would get pulled into a client situation and would reverse engineer what was going on, the first thing that went out the window every single time was communication, right? We'd pulled 6, 7, 8 resources in. We're doing like the full heroic mode switch here to get the thing fixed, to solve the problem, but not a single person, not any of those 7 or some other person, picked up the fucking phone and called the customer and said any of that. And it's the thing you have 100% control over. You can't control if the server dies. You can control whether or not you pick up the phone and call them and talk to them.
Yeah. Hey, this thing out of our control just happened. Here's what we're doing right now. I'm happy to give you updates when we have something worth sharing. You can call and bug me as much as you want, but right now I'm going to go in and work on it. How's that sound, Mr. Customer? Listen, we'll regroup by end of the day. Keep your head up. Don't worry. We got this. Click. Dude, if you do that, you'll keep them forever. And that's your job. It's not your customers are never a disruption. That's a big paradigm shift. If you feel like I can't answer the phone because it's disrupting my work, and you have a fundamental misunderstanding of your job.
Yeah.
Your job is answering the phone. You're a receptionist, dude. Imagine if a receptionist said, "I'm trying to get my work done, but this phone keeps ringing." No. No, you'd be like, "You don't know what a receptionist is, do you?" That's what I have to say. But if you're a support tech, nah, dude, that's your job. I understand it's frustrating. There are protocols. You can take somebody out of the round robin or out of the flash ring. You can have a do not disturb mode if somebody's like, "I've got to build this computer, I really can't be bothered," then do that. You know what I mean? Like, fine, but then you should have a rule of how many people are allowed to be on D&D at one time.
Right.
Because you've got to answer the phone right now, every time. When somebody places a ticket, call them. When you close a ticket, call them. They're not going to answer. It doesn't matter. You did your job. Hey, got this done. Listen, if you have any questions, I'm happy to go play by play. You are going to get an automatic review from our system is going to tell you what I did. But just let you know, it was this. I don't think it's going to be an issue for you in the future. If it is, listen, you call me directly because I will nip this thing in the bud. we don't have a crystal ball, but I feel pretty good about it. Dude, if you're just a normal human, and in my MSP, I trained all of our technicians. Basically, I put them through like a full module of my sales training.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, in Feel Good, we have a course that's exclusively for technicians.
Yeah.
And it's how to use the Feel Good close to increase your CSAT scores. It's basic sales stuff like setting agendas, communicating, aligning expectations. It's humanity 101, communication 101. And for example, my guys they would whine that it was always like, you've seen the IT crowd.
Yep.
Hello, IT. If you tried turning it off and on again, okay, goodbye. That's how they did it over and over again. So we know that we have to ask them these dumb questions. We know that they're going to be insulted by the questions, but we know that statistically it's probably either not on, not plugged in, whatever. They haven't power cycled it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, and they would always, my techs would say that, like, oh, you don't understand, and they get mad at us when we ask it, and because our guys would just sound like that. They would just sound so angry right when they picked up the phone. So we basically wrote a script that was like, hi, how can I help you today? My printer's not working. The first thing they do is emote. Frustrating.
Yeah.
Don't ask them a question first. Go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. How long has this been broken? I don't know. I just showed up. Got it. Well, listen, just so you know, because I'm not there, I have to ask you some questions. I know it's going to sound really silly, but this is just a part of my process. Is that all right? Number one, is it plugged in? Is it turned on? Oh, look at that. We fixed it. Hey, it's no problem. This happens to all of us, buddy. Don't worry. I'm always here anytime you have a problem, big or small. Have a good day. Click. And you can snicker later if you want to, but that's your job.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
So far away from the experience most people have with MSP. And it's so true, right? I mean, again, I was in it in a lot of different seats for 18 years. So like, that's a lot of time, not as in like, oh, I did this for so long. I'm just saying like a lot evolved and changed. Societal changes and everything else along those 18 years was different from start to finish. And that is evident in like the core values that existed in the 5 different MSPs that I was a part of over that point of time. Like one of them specifically, as an example, one of the core values was pick up the phone and call, right? Like on the one hand, that shouldn't have to be a core value. On the other hand, in this industry, it was a damn good thing it was a core value because it was a fireable offense if you didn't do it.
Nice.
Because it's just that simple, right? And
Yeah.
just because it's simple and it might slow you down or something else, like it didn't matter. We're not here to bang on keyboards. We're here to help people and to service them and have them feel good about the way that we do it.
Yes.
Because if you don't,
we're not even
anyone else will.
We're not even just here. We're not here to solve their problems. We're here to alleviate their frustrations.
Yeah.
And so you can close a ticket and somebody is unhappy with how you did it. Mm-hmm. That's 80% of tickets.
Yeah.
Like, I reset your email password. Click this link and you'll get a new one.
Yeah.
But they'll get a 3-star because they didn't like it. But you did you technically did you followed the standard operating procedure. Mm-hmm. But you didn't make that person happy.
Yeah.
And you can whine about that and say, oh, well, now I got to make everybody happy. Yeah, dude, that's what customer service is.
Right. Yeah. That's payroll retention. Right.
Yeah.
That's what's going to guarantee your paycheck comes back. One thing on that, because you made a good point and I glossed over it earlier. You had said, similar to like the last several years, I think we would say that we've all been in a rush to place these layers of technology between the people, right? And AI is not helping in that regard because now it's like we can smash so much more technology in between people, but what all we've really done is put layers between the people and the people. And one of the focusing questions that we had as a leadership team specific to this exact point, which is, how does this affect the client experience? Right? Every decision for the business had to pass through that. Didn't matter if it was the greatest tool, if it was the greatest platform, if it was the greatest new thing, if it was even better technically than all the other stuff. If it didn't pass the how does this affect the client experience test, like, but no, it doesn't matter. Like what actually happens? How is it different for the end user when they call our automated phone system and now they have to go through 3.5 minutes of bullshit to get the help they asked for versus the 7 seconds they currently wait now, even though it'll drive our voicemail to email ticket transcription better. Like, sorry, We had to
Yeah.
prioritize the experience we delivered over the technology that we deployed.
That's it. It's 100%. Like if I'm calling my MSP, if I have an MSP, and let me put it this way. I know a lot about what managed services do. The average user doesn't. But the average MSP client is thinking, most of the time, this MSP is milking me for money because most of the time I'm not talking to them. So it's very clear. 75% of the MSP's monthly recurring bill is passive.
Mm-hmm.
Let's let that sink for a second before we continue. You're getting, if a $4,000 monthly invoice, you're working for 1,000 of it. If that's true or not, it doesn't matter. It's true from the perspective of the end user. Because they call you twice a month. See what I mean? For two 15-minute phone calls. The other 30 days, 24/7, 365 that you claim to be on for them, they're milking you, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So then you call and they're going to sick a robot on you. You had 2 things to do this month, 2 15-minute phone calls with me. That's all I asked you for. And you couldn't even put a $30 an hour person. You couldn't even put a $30,000 a year guy on it. Mm-hmm. You couldn't have put a $24,000 a year virtual receptionist on it. That's the best you could do.
Yeah.
That should scare the shit out of you if you're an MSP.
Mm-hmm.
That's bad. That's bad, man. If you can't afford to answer your customer's phone, your business model is broken. You're in the wrong business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like when not tempered appropriately, leveraging technology incentivizes the distance we place between the people, right? I mean, that's ultimately what we've been saying here.
And it comes down to your categorization and your prioritization of the relationships. Like if your pursuit, this is the problem with being a data-driven business, is people fetishize data in our business. And they fetishize KPIs. Like they want the most effective blah, blah, blahs and conversions to super dupers. But and I'll give you an example. It would save me, let me come up with some numbers real quick. I would get 10 hours a week back and save, let's say, between $200 and $500 a month if I had an AI agent talk to my wife for me. Because I talk to my wife 2 hours a day. Imagine all the time I would save if I didn't have to talk to my wife anymore. I just put this robot on it. Looks like me. It's an AI avatar of me. It's been trained on my brain. Even if it was a literal perfect AI replication of me, if it was exactly like me, an AI clone, and I could put it in front of my wife and put VR head goggles on her and, put a warm bag of water in front of her so she thinks it's me.
Yeah.
My wife's going to leave me. And she should. Because I have made it clear by my intentions, I'm more interested in saving a number on my chart, on my spreadsheet, than I am in honoring my obligation to you, the vow, first of all, I made to you, but my unofficial vows, my social contract to you as a partner. You have a social contract as well as a legal contract to your customers. Stop trying to exit the relationship and automate intimacy. It doesn't work. You have an obligation to take care of them. So if you're using, it's exactly as absurd as the example I just gave. To be like, oh, I know, I'll hire an AI cold calling agent to cold call for my prospects so that they know this is when I'm on my best behavior, and I still sent a surrogate to our first date because I wasn't sure you'd be worth it. So I sent my buddy to tell me what you look like in real life.
Yeah, qualification agent.
Yeah, I sent a qualification agent, which was my buddy, to be like, her pictures were better. She's older than you thought she was. You see what I'm saying? Imagine you're never going to get a second date there. We're doing that on the prospecting side. Now everybody's trying to do that on the AI side, on the customer service side. I have an AI agent completing my tickets. That's not the same as a human using AI to save themselves the clicks and clacks so that they can just be present in their relationship and know that they don't have to remember every single thing that was said forever. That's a proper use of AI, right? But do you see my point? Like,
yeah, it's the absence of connection ultimately is the result of the implementation of all of that technology, all the layers that we place between it through the guise of chasing what the best practice folks tell us to do anyway, right?
Exactly. That's
like
exactly.
Squeeze more blood from the stone. Well, how am I going to do that? I'm going to put all these layers of tech in it. And then you wake up pissed off 3 years later because you're like, I don't even recognize my own company anymore. My customers are pissed. My employees aren't as happy. We don't even do game day anymore. Like all the things that brought you joy and connection within your own business. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's interesting how so much of this conversation came back to the humanity of it all. I don't think there's probably that many conversations that start off as sales and loop back to that particular baseline as far as we touched it. But the elemental truth in that is that they are inseparable. And at the end of the day, sales is still just about people, helping people, or, producing a result for another person. Persuasion, psychology, all that stuff that has not yet been replicated still exists as the fundamental ingredients. So
which is the evidence, which is the proof that you are a customer service business. Because if you remove humanity from it, it fails to succeed or exist. That's the proof that you're not a vending machine.
Yeah.
Of tickets. You're not Alexa.
Right.
You're just not. Like, so if you're sitting here, and let's full circle it back to the very beginning of the conversation. If you're saying, well, empathy is not a strength of mine, that's fine. It's not a strength of most IT people. I don't like people. I'm very, very introverted. Okay, well, listen, you've got, from my perspective, you've got three options. One is you do nothing, and you're going to keep getting the same results you have now, which you're probably not happy with, which is why you're watching webinars on how to grow. So that's door number one. Let's just nix that one right now. You're not doing what you've done will continue to get you the results that you have. Door number two is you decide that human beings are indeed very elastic, agile, and adaptable creatures, and you change. You grow, you strengthen yourself. You gird your loins, and you go through the things you're afraid of to deal with why you hate people, why you're introverted, why you're a whatever.
Yeah.
Door number three, quit. Sell your business and get the hell out of it, because you can't be trusted with a customer service business if you are not willing to go through door number two. If I'm describing you are not good enough to be in charge. And that's fine as long as you're willing to grow. But if you're not willing to grow and you're not good enough, you should fire yourself and go get a job.
Yeah.
How's that for a spicy take, Jeff?
Yeah, that's perfect. It's the greatest way to do it. It's like the last thing we'll leave to the show, but it'll be the first thing we open up with a cut. Because I agree. When coaching MSPs, one of the very first things I ask is like, what was your number for the year? Because usually they're coming to you because, again, they want to grow, but they're not in the right spots. Like, well, what was your number? What do you mean number? Well, like you're the owner, right? But you run sales. So like, what's your number? You've given yourself a number. Well, most of the time there isn't a number. Okay, great. Problem number one. Two, there's a number. Well, we wanted to grow by X. Okay, well, where are you at? Where are you at? Right? Like, okay, so great. Now this year we're in brand new 2025. So like, what's the number for the year? Period. Write it down. What happens if you don't hit that number? Not even that anymore. It's like you will fire yourself as the sales rep if you do not hit that number, but we won't wait till the end of the year. It's like, here's the quarter, right? Go do the things. But it kind of comes back to that same component, accountability, all the other stuff that we talked about, fear, failure, learning, growing, facing ourselves, owning it. So we're definitely going to wrap up with that spicy take for sure. Brian, it was a blast to lay down some of this truth. I definitely think it's going to be a fresh conversation. People should go back and listen to it for a couple of times because there's plenty laced throughout. If people want more of you, where and how do they find you to get in touch?
Yeah, thanks. MSPSalesPodcast.com. You can find MSP Sales Podcasts anywhere you listen to them. That's something we started at the time of recording. I think we've got 7 episodes out or something, but I've got like 10 more already recorded. So that's just another free way to listen to us talk. Of course, feelgoodmsp.com. Every month I have a training, a 3-day training that's usually less than $100, 3 to 5 hours of live with me in a small group setting of like 10 MSPs. And we have all sorts of free resources and stuff too on feelgoodmsp.com. So if this is your cup of tea, if you don't mind mainlining some accountability and you're serious about the results, then I'd recommend going there.
Right. So if $33 a day is too rich for desiring change, like if I did the mental sales guy math really quick there, then, you know, it kind of goes back to the other part of the conversation. Can they really be helped in some ways?
Yeah.
So,
you're just not ready for it. And that's fine too. But
yeah, it's fine too. Perfect.
Then don't call me.
Well, thank you. Yeah, don't call you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you again for showing up. Oh, wait, we can't leave without the question.
Oh,
we got to get one question from you that we're going to leave behind for the next guest. And usually I like to preface it sort of by if you think back over your experience, you know, having been a salesperson, VP of sales, now a consultant, you've kind of got a breadth of experience there. But what is one question that you wish you had the answer to at the beginning of your journey?
One question I wish I had the answer to at the beginning.
Yeah, or maybe better said, if you could have asked any question at the beginning to get the answer you were seeking, what would that question have been?
You tell me if this is cheating, but this is the question that comes to mind.
Okay.
Consider a business not unlike my own, business with no central office. If there's a, call it a 10 to 20 user business, all work from anywhere, all bring your own device, do they need an MSP? And how would you sell it to them? How would you sell managed services to a work from anywhere, bring your own device, Google Workspace business? Do they need it?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I like the question because it's going to make someone squirm to really think through it. Like you have to be thinking deeply about what it is you truly sell. And that exercise should be great for anyone listening too.
Yeah. And spoiler alert, remember earlier I said, if your product isn't selling, sell something better. This is the business of the future.
Yeah.
So if they don't need what we sell, we will not be in the future.
Yeah. So how do you reposition and repackage your messaging to meet the need of the business described?
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll leave it there.
Cool, man.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks again, Jeff.